Thank you again for being here this morning with us at our monthly Ann Arbor Democratic Party meeting. It's June 12th, and our topic this month is to ask you, as our leaders in our county prosecutor office, about some of the changes you've made since you've come into office. So today we're really excited to have our prosecutor here, elected Ellie Savit, and the chief assistant prosecutor, Victoria Burton-Harris. So thank you both for joining us this morning. And as we get started, I'm just wondering if you could give us a quick background of yourself as how you got into office recently, and just so we can get to know you a little bit since you've been here for a few months.
Absolutely. So I will start. I am born and raised in Ann Arbor. Pioneer High School alum. What I always say is I did not attend the University of Michigan for undergrad, so I'm not a lifelong Ann Arborite. That was not by choice. I thought I was a college basketball player. The University of Michigan vehemently disagreed with my self-assessment, so I went over to Kalamazoo College on the west side of the state, which is where I started to think, boy, if I was able to convince them, little tiny school, that I could play college basketball despite being a 6'4" center that can't dunk, maybe my advocacy skills are pretty good and I should go to law school. My career actually started as an 8th grade U.S. history teacher. I taught in the New York City public schools, special education and general education classes. Came back to U of M for law school. I started my career out working for 2 federal judges. I was then in private practice for a couple of years where, among other things, I represented children with disabilities in the education system, victims of domestic violence and spousal abuse that were seeking asylum in this country, criminal defendants up on appeal. After that, I had the tremendous opportunity to work on the U.S. Supreme Court for the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And after that, I decided to come home. Moved back to Ann Arbor. Before this, I worked as a senior legal counsel at the city of Detroit, where, among other things, I led our criminal justice reform work and also our work around expungement, which is something that is carried through into my current role. And the reason that I decided to run for Washtenaw County prosecutor is really, despite not being a prosecutor by training, I've seen throughout my career how the cascading consequences of the criminal legal system can really affect people in dramatic ways. A criminal record can stay with somebody for the rest of their lives and prevent people from getting jobs, from getting housing, from securing educational opportunities. When I was in private practice, I represented folks in immigration proceedings who were facing deportation from this country, some dating back to convictions that were 30 years old, and when they had only they'd been in this country since the time they were 4 years old. So I decided to run for prosecutor because I'd seen those cascading consequences. At the center of it was the criminal legal system. And we're going to talk a little bit about the reforms that we've made, but we've been in office about 6 months now. And we're very excited about some of the things that we've been able to put in place. But when I say we, I really mean we, because, I was reminiscing on Victoria today because in addition to Mr. Daniel, if you're still on, again, happy birthday. But it's also Victoria's birthday. So happy birthday, Victoria. And we actually first met when she was running a similar campaign as I was for Wayne County prosecutor over the county next door. And we sat down and grabbed coffee in downtown Detroit and sort of talked through our campaigns. And I would have had no idea that that was the start of a partnership that is really, I'm not overemphasizing this by saying it is one of the most meaningful partnerships I have ever had in my life. because, Victoria and I work hand in glove on everything that we are doing here in Washtenaw County. She is a brilliant lawyer. She is an incredible manager. She is a talented and compassionate person in everything that she does. And we both see things the same way. She's no stranger to Washtenaw County, though she's back here now because she attended undergrad at the University of Michigan Law School. But I'm so grateful and fortunate, and I think we all are, to have her as my partner in justice. I used to say partner in crime, and people told me I got to stop using that phrase because we're prosecutors now. So I'll turn it over to Victoria, but I just wanted to say that, especially because it's her birthday, and say how much I appreciate you, Victoria.
Thank you, Ellie. I'm going to try to top it and say I not only appreciate you, but I love you from the bottom of my heart. The work that we are doing in this community, it sets my soul on fire every single day. When I met Ellie, like he said, it was at the start. He had already really started his campaign, and it was really the start of my campaign. I think he had about a year on me at that point, right, Ellie?
A little less.
Yeah. And people may wonder, well, why were you so behind in starting your campaign? And the answer to that is that I was very happy with my life as a criminal defense and family law attorney. I had started my own practice back in 2014. I had an office in the heart of downtown Detroit. I was happy. I did a lot of work with the community grassroots organizations, the National Lawyers Guild, which I sit on the board for. I enjoyed representing people who were arrested after protests and demonstrations. I enjoyed representing local organizations, doing Know Your Rights trainings, and I wasn't ready to give that up. And folks began to ask me if I would run for prosecutor. And I thought it came out of nowhere. And little did I know, there was a massive effort underway to run a progressive prosecutor campaign in Wayne County. And that effort started several years ago. They were just missing one pretty important ingredient, and that was the candidate. They had yet to find the right candidate that they wanted to run. And when I say they, there was a coalition of local organizations and national organizations who had come together because they were looking at, a lot of injustices that were coming out of the criminal legal system throughout the country, and they had their eye on Wayne County. And as a criminal defense attorney, I knew all too well, from being in the courtroom every day, what that injustice looked like, how it played out, and who it impacted the most. It impacted marginalized folks the most, people of color, people living in poverty, people with disabilities, people who have mental health issues, behavioral health problems, substance abuse issues. And it's a very parasitic system, the system that we work in. It chews you up, but it does not spit you out. It chews you up and it keeps you on this hamster wheel because you're never really free of it once you come into this system. Once a prosecutor charges you with a crime, you are going to have long-term impacts more than likely if you belong to one of those marginalized communities. You are going to, if you are convicted, deal with all of those consequences. And if you're not, you're still going to be dealing with the stigma that you did something wrong, that you're a criminal, just because you face criminal charges, even if you beat them, even if you walk away with a not guilty verdict or a dismissal. And that, quite frankly, is what got me to stop saying no, that I would not run when I was asked, to, okay, maybe I should do this. Because I began to really understand that the prosecutor is the most powerful actor in the criminal legal system. Prosecutors decide who to charge, when to charge, what to charge. So we single-handedly decide who comes into the system. That means that, but for our decisions to bring someone into the system, they don't ever see a judge, they don't ever see a jury, they don't ever see a probation officer. It starts with us, right? And, once I really began to internalize the power that prosecutors have on our communities, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to, instead of using the power of the prosecutor's office to be really tough on crime and to tear apart communities and cause harm, I wanted to use that power for good. I wanted to use that power to be smarter on crime, to get to the root cause of why people commit crimes, because I understand that if we don't do that, we're continuously doing what we've always done, sticking someone in a jail cell where they come right back out and engage in the exact same behavior, because nothing has been learned. No rehabilitation really happens in jails or prisons. And so we need to focus more on the root causes of why people commit harm. Why do people commit crimes? And let's rehabilitate them from that point, not sticking them in a jail cell for everything or in prison. Yes, Ellie and I do believe that there are times in people, there are times where people need to be separated from the community. Absolutely. And we've seen that play out this week. And I'm happy to talk a little bit about that as much as we can and answer some questions, because you all deserve answers to your questions. But there are also times that separation from the community is not only appropriate, but it's not helpful and it's quite harmful. And in being in the prosecutor's office with this kind of power, it's important to us that we are not only creating safe communities, but just communities, and doing so fairly and treating everybody equitably. And so, you know, when I first said, yes, I will run, it was a little bit late in the campaign season, and everyone was kicking and screaming like, where is she at? Why won't she say yes already? And I'm like, okay, fine, I get it. I've said yes, let's do this. And someone introduced me to Ellie. I met him and Ellie asked me questions, and quite frankly, I didn't have all of the answers. He goes, how are you going to raise money? And I said, I don't know. And he said, you know, well, what are you going to do about this? And what are you going to do? I said, Ellie, I don't know. I know what's in my heart. I know what I've experienced as a criminal defense attorney. I know the problems in this system, and I know how to change them, how to address them. And then fast forward to the following year, a pandemic hit us. But I was still able to raise over $250,000, outraised my opponent, who was a longtime incumbent. And despite not being successful in my primary in Wayne County, we shifted the conversation. We brought folks to the table to talk about more progressive reforms in the criminal legal space than we ever have before. We had programs set up to divert more people out of the criminal legal system than we've ever had before. And then the best thing that came out of me winning that race and losing it was being with Ellie. Ellie called me and she said, you know, look, you ran a phenomenal race. I still want to congratulate you on that, even though you weren't successful. And I want you to come out and advise me as I set up my transition team to go into office myself. And I said, okay, no problem. It's an absolute honor to do that. He was really setting me up, because little did I know he was going to call again and say, well, you know, it would really be great if you considered coming out here full time and helping me run my office. And I tried to play hard to get. This is kind of like our love story. We tell people he put a ring on it at that moment, but I wasn't quite ready to say yes, even though in my heart I wanted to. And so we sat down and we talked, did something like an interview. And then at the end, he said, you know, I want to formally offer you the position. And I said, I got to think about this. I need a day. I called him back the same day, just a few hours later. And I was like, yes, 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 I will do this. So that is how I ended up in Washtenaw County. I could not have asked for a better path to get here. It taught me a lot. And I absolutely love being in this community. This community is great. Our community partners, stakeholders within the system and outside of the system within the community, in terms of organizations and agencies, have all just been phenomenal. So that's my story and how I got here.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you both for introducing yourself and sharing how you got from your training to here today with us in our county. So I know that you have made some changes in the first 6 months, and I'm hoping that you can walk us through some of those. I think some things you spoke about while each of you were in your separate campaigns, there were a lot of similarities. And I know that you still have more things that you'd like to put in place over time. So could you just start by walking us through, if you'd like to go one by one, or, if there's a theming that you'd like to do, please walk us through the changes you've made to the office so far. And then we'll see if folks have questions, and then we can look at what's coming on the horizon.
Sure. And one thing I will say, because we've made a lot of changes and built, importantly, a lot of partnerships as well. And I'm not sure that we are going to be able to get through all of them, but all of them, we believe in transparency, we believe in openness, and we put all of our policies on the Washtenaw County Prosecutor's Office's website. It's the same policy that our assistant prosecuting attorneys have and are bound by. So you can see exactly what we're doing, exactly how we're making decisions in cases. I do want to start by talking about cash bail. Cash bail is a system in which a person is arrested for a crime, and they are told that they can be freed from jail only if they come up with a certain amount of money out of their bank account. Now, as an office, we oppose cash bail. And we do not seek it, though we do seek other kinds of bonds, which came out this week with the case that everybody has been focused on. We don't seek cash bail, although judges can still impose it, of course. And the reason for that is twofold. One is what cash bail means is that there are people who are in jail really and accused of very minor crimes who don't pose a threat to the community. But they, because they're poor, because they're working class, can sit in jail for days or weeks or months simply because they don't have the money to pay to get out. And these are folks that don't pose a danger to the community. And there's really cascading consequences of that. Because what happens if you're sitting in jail and you work a shift job for a day or two? Well, the research shows us you're more likely than not to lose your job, right? And if you lose your job, what's going to happen? If you got a family, you might lose your home, right? If you're renting, your family is going to need a new place to stay. Your kids may be homeless, may have to stay with relatives, right? And what we know is in the best circumstances, switching schools in the middle of the year for kids results in about 6 months loss of academic growth. And trust me, having a caregiver who is just involved is not the best of circumstances. So you think about all that. And again, this is just based on how much money you had in your bank account to begin with. It really imposes significant and cascading harms. But there's another side of the equation too, which is that a cash bail-based system allows people who are dangerous and who should not be out of jail pending trial, if they have the resources, they can go free, right? And we think that, look, dangerous people should be held in jail pending trial if community safety requires it. And that should be true regardless of whether those dangerous people are poor, whether they're wealthy, and whether they are somewhere in between. So what we advocate for in the prosecutor's office is not for cash bail, but rather we try to take money off the table and impose non-monetary conditions that will result in somebody being held in jail if they are a danger to the community, right? Until and unless those conditions can be met to ensure public safety, which in a lot of cases they can't, we advocate for them to stay in jail. In some cases, we just say, look, just categorically, you should not be able to go free pending trial. And we're legally restricted in how we're able to do that, just because of the Michigan Constitution only allowed us to seek that for certain offenses. I will note with the case this week, we weren't able, I would have, and I said this in court on Thursday when we were arguing the emergency motion, if I had been legally able to advocate for him just to get no bond and be in jail, I would have. Legally, we weren't allowed to, so we had to advocate for other things. But at the end of the day, what's important is that the size of your bank account not determine the justice that you get. And that's true both because we don't want poor people, working class people held in jail, again, before they've been convicted of anything, simply because they don't have enough money because of the size of their bank account. And we don't want wealthy people who do pose a danger to the community or who may pose a flight risk to be able to buy their way out of jail when doing so will harm our community. So that's a policy change that we put in place on our first Monday in office with respect to cash bail, and we've abided by it since. Frankly, to me, there's no moral or logical justification for a cash bail based system. There just isn't. It is straightforwardly a wealth-based discriminatory system. And the only reason that we maintain it is because it is the way things have always been done. We inherited this system from, like so much else in this country, from 16th century England. And it's not fair and it's not right. And we should be moving forward and doing better. Now, one question that we're often asked is this some sort of radical experiment? Do we know this is going to work? Well, yes, we have data on this. Washington, D.C. got rid of cash bail 30 years ago. 30 years ago, they haven't imposed cash bail. New Jersey got rid of it in 2017. And you actually saw the crime rates fall in New Jersey in 2017 after bail reform because criminologists suspect, and it's always a complicated question as to whether crime rates rose or fell because of certain things. But criminologists have suggested that, in fact, the reason crime rates fell in New Jersey after bail reform was because people weren't committing crimes of desperation once they got out, because now they had lost their jobs and didn't have housing and had to do something in order to provide for themselves. Illinois became, Illinois just this year abolished cash bail entirely. So the trend is moving in the right direction. And, I'm confident that within our lifetimes, we will recognize that this system that we've inherited just doesn't make sense. It doesn't promote community safety, and it's discriminatory on the basis of wealth. And we're sort of proud to be on the leading edge of that reform here in Washtenaw County. Victoria, you want to talk about some other stuff? Or should we?
Well, I popped back in because I was actually going to ask if you had some examples of when a person needs to be removed from the community or when they could be returned to the community while they're awaiting any sort of charges trial. So I was just wondering if you had examples of that. And then another question I'll put out there now, and then you can answer between the two of you afterward, is about on the horizon, looking at data. You started this removal of cash bail 6 months ago. Probably we won't see any data about this yet in our community. It seems too short of a timeline. But when should we expect to see any sort of impact on this? Is this like a 12-month thing? So that's just two questions for you there.
All right, I'm going to answer your first question and give some examples, and then kick it over to Ellie to talk about the data part, because I'm sure he's going to add on something additional and exciting that we have in terms of a partnership with some folks around town. So an example, I'm going to go back to, again, this week, an example of bond conditions without using cash bail that can be imposed to separate someone from the community for the purpose of keeping us safe would be exactly what we asked for this week in our emergency bond hearing. We asked for a $100,000 surety bond. We asked for a GPS tether. We asked for a responsible member of the community to be responsible for the defendant if and when he is released and able to post the surety bond. Or in this case, it's the judge turned it into cash or surety, but we asked for surety. And that responsible member of the community has to monitor the defendant 24/7. That means that more than likely that person is going to have to be retired, to be at home all day or working from home all day at the very least. That means that that person is going to have or need to have access to a car to do the grocery shopping, to do the errand running, right? We are asking, well, we did ask, and it was granted, that the defendant be released to someone who can ensure that no further harm is committed if he should be released pending trial. Those are examples of non-monetary conditions. Those are hoops that one has to jump through in order to return to the community in a way that we feel comfortable, so that the community is still safe. Do we believe that people belong with their families and in the community? For the most part, yes. But if that means that that person is going to potentially cause harm to the community, then we're going to ask the court to impose some pretty heavy conditions and restrictions to ensure community safety. And until those conditions can be met, then that means that the defendant is not released. So for example, if the defendant, in this case, this past week, decides to post a $100,000 cash bond, that's insufficient because other conditions have to be met. The flip side of that, go ahead, Carrie. If you have a question about that, I certainly want to clarify.
Well, I did want to jump in because you mentioned the terms surety and cash, and some of us are curious if you could please define the difference between those kinds of bonds. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So cash is exactly what cash is, right? You can go, Bill Bondsman, you can go to your bank if you have it, and cash is posted. Oftentimes, you can even do 10% of that amount if the court orders it, and in this case, it was not ordered. Surety bonds are a little bit different. You got to personally guarantee that, right? If you have property that is worth that or something else in place of it, and you can personally guarantee that you are good for that amount of money, it's a little bit different than just being able to go and get your hands on some cash. And so oftentimes it's a bit harder for people to secure and post a surety bond as opposed to a cash bond. There are insurance companies who will get involved and assist with the posting of that surety bond. But again, you got to jump through hoops. You're going to have to get an insurance company on board. I've had to do surety bonds for clients when I was a defense attorney, and it's a lot. It's a lot. And oftentimes insurance companies say, no, you're too much of a risk. I'm not going to do that. So I hope, and Ellie, fill in if you want to hear on the surety versus cash bond.
No. I think that was a good recounting of it. I realize these are terms that lawyers know, and we've and when we're steeped in it, they just like come out of our mouths. So I appreciate the opportunity to clarify. And I think Victoria, of course, did a good job. But I want to just emphasize one more thing in terms of what she was articulating with the condition that a responsible member of the community be identified. All of what she was saying is going to be like in this case, for example, is going to be an incredibly high bar to meet, right? And query whether this defendant is ever going to be able to find somebody that can actually ensure public safety, given what happened in this case. Just using this case as an example. That's kind of the point, right? What we do with cash bonds, we try to set monetary conditions so high, and we say, oh, well, we're keeping it safe because that's a big number, and probably nobody will be able to come with that money. But sometimes they do, right? And if they get caught with that money, then they're just back out, even if they pose a danger. So from our perspective, it makes sense. And again, we do in cases rely on surety bonds and the like, but to also make sure that we're trying to set non-monetary conditions that are so high, because look, that's another layer that will keep you in there until those can be met, if so ordered by a judge. And then at least look, sometimes people will clear them, sometimes they won't. But at least if you clear them, it's more connected to public safety than is just coming up with a certain amount of cash. Just being able to come up with a certain amount of cash doesn't make you any less dangerous, doesn't do anything to ensure the safety of the community. It just means you had some money socked away someplace. If we're imposing non-monetary conditions that are targeted to community safety, often those will be high enough that somebody still may not be released, right? And that's kind of the point. But if they do clear those, and sometimes it's happened, right? We've requested this, we've had a hearing, and the judge has said, the conditions in my view are sufficient to ensure public safety. But at least then we've gotten those conditions in place rather than just letting somebody out, where who knows what they're going to do just because they had money available in their bank account.
Let me give you a quick example, Carrie, of non-monetary conditions that allow someone rather quickly to go back into the community, unlike this past week where, like Ellie said, we think that it's going to be quite difficult for that particular defendant to return to the community. Oftentimes, people commit crimes involving drugs or alcohol. If you've had too much to drink and then you get into a bar fight, or you assault someone once you return home in your neighborhood or within your own home. We can, in which we often do, ask for bond conditions that include no alcohol use while you are awaiting trial, no drug use, drug testing, alcohol testing. We can ask for that on a daily basis, a weekly basis. We can ask for it 2 to 3 times a day if we believe that the history of the person and the facts warrant it. We have been known to ask for not just a GPS tether, but for particular go zones, meaning that you can only go to certain areas, right? Or we can do no-go zones, meaning that you cannot go to a certain area. We routinely will ask for no contact with the person who a defendant may have harmed. We routinely ask for someone who's going to be released pending trial to seek mental health treatment at one of the community centers around town. We have been developing very good relationships with several agencies and organizations for that purpose, so that we are aware of the resources available in our communities to start helping people right away. We don't want to wait until someone has to be sentenced in order to start getting the help that they need, because quite frankly, nothing is guaranteed. A conviction is not guaranteed, and therefore it's not guaranteed that someone will be sentenced in order to do certain things much later into a case, right? So we like to dig into a case from the very beginning, try to start figuring out, by even looking at old cases, what are some of the issues at play here? What do we need to ask the court to impose that will not just help the defendant, but really keep our community safe? So, if mental health was a factor in the behavior, if drugs or alcohol, whatever played a part in that person committing the crime and causing harm, then we want to address that right now so that we don't continue to see further harm in our community. So that's an example of non-monetary bond conditions that we routinely ask for on a daily basis that will allow people to be quickly released and back into the community.
Great, thank you. And then the comment about data, is there any data we should be, as all of us are members of this organization, the local Ann Arbor Democratic Club, and then, as citizens, just what should we be looking for? What should we be listening for from you to see the impact of this particular policy change?
So I am very excited about our data partnership that we have in place. And I will tell you that data and good data is frankly hard to come by in the criminal legal system. Part of that is because there's so many actors involved, and getting sort of cross-sector data to link up and talk to each other is difficult. You know, you've got the jail, and you've got the prosecutor's office, and you've got the courts, and you've got the Michigan Department of Corrections, right? It's difficult. The other thing is, even internally, our systems, quite candidly, have not been built for backwards querying and for looking at trends. Our case management systems are built for, you know, just dealing with the individual case that's in front of the lawyer. So what we did, and this was a partnership that we put into place in week 1 of being in office, is we are partnering with the ACLU and the University of Michigan Law School. We got grants to do this. And we have a team at U of M, which is comprised, and I'm not exaggerating here, of some of the leading empirical criminal justice scholars in the entire country that happen to be in our backyard at the U of M, that are working on this project and are going to be creating a transparent data dashboard with metrics that we can be looking at to see how we are doing, and to make sure that you know, A, we're being transparent with it, and B, that you know, if we're seeing trends in data that indicate that something may not be working, we can course correct, because, you know, you've got to look at data, and data needs to inform your decisions. So we are in that process now, and I am, you know, I'm a lawyer. I am not a data guy, but we set this up. We were able to get it off the ground quite quickly, actually. You know, given all of the sort of constraints that always come from launching a project of this size. The data researchers are working it's full time for one of our researchers, and we've got additional institutional support from the ACLU and the University of Michigan. They have open access to all of our files. They're building out systems. They're trying to clean the data to make sure that you know, we're actually it's good, which I am told is always the most the most difficult part of any data project. So you can read more about this and the whole scope of work and the indicators you can be looking for on our website. And I can drop the link in the chat to that because we try to be transparent about everything. We're hoping that once the data is cleaned, that actually, at least on the quantitative piece of things, we're going to be able to release some stuff relating to like racial disparities and the like relatively quickly. The next piece is going to be a qualitative analysis of how we are doing and the decisions that we are making in individual cases, because really the truth of the matter is that no two cases are exactly alike, and we shouldn't just be looking at the aggregate data to inform decision making. So that will be a more time intensive piece, but we're going to be transparent. We're going to be releasing this on our website, and the most important thing is that moving forward, we are at the same time that we are working on this, building out ways that we can track this stuff moving forward, so that we don't have to go through this whole process once every 5 years or 10 years to see how we are doing. So it's a massive shift, quite candidly, in both how we're looking at data and how we're doing things. But I'm excited about it. I'm really excited about the team that we have. And you know, we have an obligation in the justice system to do what works. And for far too long, we've done things just because it's the way that we've always done things. And you know, that can't happen anymore. We're both in this to change things and to do the right thing, and we owe it to ourselves and to the community to have data that reflects that and that can also guide our practices.
So just a couple things. One, the timeline for the first round of data. Do you have any idea when we might see some of that initial data? Would it be this calendar year, or maybe not till next year?
I would hope this calendar year, though I am always skeptical to, I'm always hesitant to say with anything involving data that it's going to be ready. This is just not my field, right? And it's got to be clean. I've been scarred by data projects in the past where it took a little bit longer, but certainly I believe that we are on track to have the initial tranche of this out by the end of the calendar year, but no promises. Things can go awry when you're dealing with this amount of data and a system that wasn't built for this kind of backward and forward-looking query.
Mm-hmm. So thank you for helping us understand that. And you know, our Senator Irwin is also in attendance today, and he put a comment in the chat about trying to do the same thing with banning cash bail at the state level legislatively, but there's been some roadblocks. Even in the state house, there's a person who's a bail bondsman. So that person's a little opposed. And so our senator has introduced some bills that haven't gotten there. So thank you, Senator Irwin, for trying to bring that. And the reason I was asking about data was there might be a way for our senator to use this data at the state level and make it even harder for people to push back against it if the data shows that this is effective.
Yeah.
So,
and I will say Senator Irwin has been a champion of this for years, and thank you for fighting for bail reform in Lansing. You know, the fact that you have a literal bail bondsman who is the one leading the charge against it is just it's so cartoon villainy, right? I mean, like he's profiting off of people off of this system, and he's who they put out in front to say, oh no, you can't possibly do this. Like, come on.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a conflict of interest there.
A little bit.
Right. So thank you for talking a little bit about your first policy out of the gate there, was about banning cash bail. And I know that, you know, we have about 20 minutes left in this hour of programming, and you have a lot of policies that you've worked on already in the first 6 months. Before we move on to the next one question we have just in general, so far, have you had to kind of reconfigure any of your policies or, you know, incrementally change them after you put the first one out? You know, if so, maybe that's the next one you could start with, and then we can move on to some of the other ones.
So, sorry, Ellie, we have not found a need to change or modify our policies that we've displayed on our website. But what we have done in the first 6 months was, you know, examine how things are working within our office. And as we see them play out on the ground, we always come back to the drawing board and we may modify things, which we just did yesterday, actually, as a result of the recent events this week. And I'm happy to kick it back over to Ellie because that was his directive personally for him to share a bit about.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll talk about that, and then I'll talk about some of the written policies. So one thing that became, so when I took office, consistent with our policy on cash bail, we wanted to be providing recommendations to the court on bond in every single case that we charged. Historically, that hadn't happened. And that's not just a Washtenaw County thing. Historically, prosecutors just really don't weigh in at all on the initial bond decision when somebody is in front of a magistrate. But I thought, look, if we're serious about ending cash bail, we got to tell people, we got to tell the court what we think is a option that can nevertheless ensure public safety without relying on cash bail. So we're going to make written recommendations to the court in every single case. And that's a new system that we have in place. And we've been filling those out in every single case. Now, the corollary to that is, you know, because prosecutors don't typically weigh in on bond, is that prosecutors are not typically present at the initial arraignment. And again, that's true in Washtenaw. It's true across the country. But what became apparent to me this week was, you know, consistent with how we've been doing things. We made a written recommendation to the magistrate on bond in the Ryan Lee Wing case, but we weren't at the arraignment because we weren't staffed to be at the arraignment. And I think that we need to take ownership over the fact that we could have done things differently. And if we are making these written recommendations, right, that having somebody on hand to explain to the magistrate why we made them would be helpful to the court and to the system. So, you know, the first thing and most important thing that we were focused on doing this week was getting that shooter back in custody. We filed the emergency motion. We went in front of the court. It was granted. But the second important thing is to take ownership over where we can do things better in the future at our part of the system. And so we worked all day yesterday with our chief of warrants on a way that with our resources, we can be present at the arraignments in these serious cases to explain the written recommendations that we are now making to the court. So that will be what we do going forward. And, you know, we put together a schedule and we've got people scheduled to cover arraignments for all of next week, which, you know, and Victoria's worked in a number of other counties, I think puts us at a really different space than virtually every other county in Michigan. Victoria, correct me if I'm wrong, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. So not only are we providing the written recommendations, we're going to be showing up too. So that's something that we decided to do in response to what we saw. I think I won't editorialize, being an initial decision that we disagreed with this week, which luckily we were able to get modified. We want to make sure that we do everything possible to make sure that doesn't happen again. The other thing I'll say with respect to the policies is Victoria's right. Like substantively, we haven't really changed much during our first 6 months, but I want to emphasize, we've clarified things here and there, but I want to emphasize that's because if you look at all of our policies, they are the result of over 180 people that served on our working groups, representing a broad diversity of perspectives in the criminal legal system and in the community. So we had law enforcement at the table, we had domestic violence advocates, we had defense lawyers, we had civil liberties lawyers, faith leaders, neighborhood leaders, right, educators, and the like that were all involved in these working groups, and we hashed things out with them. And one of the things that I will say is, I ran on reform, I ran on the policies that we put out, but in these working groups, it was very helpful that, for example, law enforcement was able to say, well, what about this particular situation? What do you want our officers to do here? How does that fit within your policy? And we previewed it with folks, and we went back, we made changes before they were released. And then we've had, sort of requests for clarification. And we've clarified, what's in the policies because we want to, we're one actor in the system. And I think it's incumbent on us to work with all of our partners, both inside and outside of the criminal legal system, to make sure that we're getting these policies right and to take into account their perspectives as well.
Thank you. So what is the next policy you'd like to talk about, or would you like to give us a little bit of a preview on what you're working on that we might see out the rest of the year or maybe in the next year?
Well, let me say something really quick because it is Pride Month, and so I think it's appropriate to highlight what we've done around LGBTQ issues. One thing that we have done is we partnered with a organization called Fair Michigan, which actually a well-known Democrat that you may have heard of named Dana Nessel founded. And what Fair Michigan is it's an organization that has worked in other counties. It started in Wayne County. And they specifically come on board and help prosecutors prosecute crimes that target the LGBTQ community. And the reason that's so important is because historically, to be perfectly honest, law enforcement and prosecutors have not been very sensitive to victims who may be LGBTQ. And there's been a lot of distrust in those communities of law enforcement. I mean, look, it's Pride Month is Pride Month because of an anti-police riot at Stonewall, right? So that's why we're celebrating this now. So having specialized victims advocates and prosecutors that can help prosecute these cases ensures that the victim remains a part of the case, right? Because they're being treated with respect, because they're being treated with somebody with sensitivity towards their community. And Fair Michigan has done great work, and I believe they have a 100% conviction rate in these cases across the state. So we brought on board that partnership with Fair Michigan. We also adopted their transgender interaction policy to make sure that with members of our transgender community, we are treating them with respect and dignity, and using their correct pronouns and the like. And this is a policy that Fair Michigan put together with us that is now something that's on everybody in our office, from lawyers to legal assistants to victims advocates, to interns, right? And then the other thing that we put into place was legal guidance. I issued legal guidance in February, providing that we will be charging as hate crimes or crimes that target members of our LGBTQ community, So crimes are on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. Our law, our ethnic intimidation law, it's called the ethnic intimidation law, but it's the broad hate crimes law in Michigan. It doesn't currently expressly cover crimes that are committed on the basis of somebody's sexual orientation or gender identity. But with recent court decisions, it is quite clear to me that sexual orientation and gender identity are in fact covered by that law, because the law prohibits, the law covers crimes that were committed based on somebody's gender, and I'll just explain that. This is a a legal theory that's been adopted by the courts. It is impossible to discriminate on the basis of sex. The U.S. Supreme Court has said this, or discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity without discriminating on the basis of sex, right? Because if you are going to fire me from my job because I am a man who is attracted to men, but a woman attracted to men would not have been fired, sex is the but-for cause of that. So the Supreme Court has said discrimination on the basis of sex encompasses sexual orientation. Same thing with gender identity. If you are going to fire me from my job because as a male, because my sex assigned at birth was female, right? But a male whose sex assigned at birth was male wouldn't have been fired, then that is again discrimination on the basis of sex. So just as it is impossible to discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity without discriminating on the basis of sex, as the Supreme Court of the United States has said, our legal guidance says it is impossible to target somebody because of their sexual orientation or gender identity without targeting them on the basis of gender. And so we are moving forward with hate crimes on that basis. And I want to highlight this not just because it's Pride Month, because actually, quite literally, as we speak, at arraignments right now, and we've got a prosecutor there. We are charging somebody with a hate crime for the first time under this legal guidance in partnership with our partners at Fair Michigan, and you can look for a news release on that next week. But we're laser focused on standing up to hate crimes because in my view, hate crimes are probably the most pernicious of crimes because you are being targeted because of who you are, right? And the lasting harm that causes, not just for that person, but for communities, is really, really significant. So that's something that I wanted to highlight, both because of what's going on right now in court and because it is Pride Month. So I wanted to highlight that.
Ms. Burton-Harris, do you want to add anything to that, or?
Well, we have a couple of other things on the horizon, and I know we have a few minutes left, but I will just speak a little bit about how we are continuing to try to address the population that comes into the criminal legal system because they have a drug or alcohol addiction. We do currently have drug treatment courts in Washtenaw County. Our Chief Judge, Carol Kunke, presides over our drug court. But, just like every other program or specialty court, there's a capacity issue. And that specialty court is already at capacity with the wait list. And we have always, from day one, encouraged our APAs to bring ideas up to us. If you have a creative way to make this system work for everyone, to make it work better and more fair, bring it up to us. We will support that. And so we had an APA who is assigned to our drug court for Judge Kunke bring it up to me that she had a desire to do not an expansion of drug court, but an adjacent program so that we could continue addressing folks who have substance abuse problems and commit crimes because of those substance abuse issues, that there's no room for them in our drug court. And so I said, okay, let's build this out. And so together, she and I and our partners at the Michigan Department of Corrections Probation, we have worked on a drug alternative probation. which essentially is our office requesting probation conditions and terms that are very similar to the same probation conditions and terms to drug court. And so that means that even if you can't get into drug court because it's full, our office has the ability to recommend conditions that we've already previewed with the judge on the bench, and they all have said, this is wonderful. If you all recommend this to us and you flag a case that it's not a drug court case, but a drug court adjacent case, we will honor your request, and we will, absent some unique circumstance, adopt your recommendations for probation and see to it that that individual gets the drug testing and the drug treatment and the support that they need. Because otherwise, we know we're going to continue to see them. We have what we call frequent flyers, and it breaks our heart. We understand that continuing to charge them and convict them of crimes, to put them on regular probation or even send them to prison for them to come out and still, use drugs in a way that causes them to commit harm, that's going to continue to happen unless we disrupt that cycle and really address the problem. So that's something that we are building out. You can look for that sometime soon this summer. We are building out diversion and deflection programs. We have a partnership with the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office and modeling a LEAD program after King County in Seattle, Washington, where we are looking to partner with law enforcement and folks who have mental health, behavioral health problems that law enforcement can identify right on the street, because more than likely, again, they're frequent flyers and law enforcement is familiar with them. Instead of picking them up and taking them to the jail, submitting paperwork for our office to authorize criminal charges, they can take them for an assessment immediately so that they can get the help that they need. And in that partnership, there is a coordinator with the sheriff's office. We've hired an APA that will work specifically with that LEAD program and other diversion programs from our office. So we are doing a number of things to, again, get to the root cause of why people commit crimes, because that is what will ultimately keep us safe as a community.
We can't hear you, Gary.
Yeah.
And so I'm sorry if there's a lag here, but so thank you for working on those things and giving us some of that that future view. Are there any final comments you'd have for our club members? We've had all the questions from the chat box asked to you. So do you have any final closing comments for us?
I will say, when I received the email from you, Carrie, you informed us that the group wanted us to come and talk about our policies, what we are intending to do next, and ultimately how you all can help us. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that third prong, what you all can do to help us in our efforts with this work. You all are more than likely aware that the law has recently changed around expungements, and it allows more people to expunge their records than we've ever had available to us in the state of Michigan. And our office has created a conviction integrity and expungement unit. And we've hired an APA who runs that unit. And she is absolutely phenomenal. We were able to steal her from the Mid-Atlantic Innocence Project, where she was a star. She's continuing to be a rock star here in Washtenaw County. And she is leading an effort to get out of our office, get into the community with several of our summer interns, and also Ellie. And I try to pull him away from that because if it were up to him, Ellie would just be in the community every day, all day. But she is leading the effort to make sure that our community is aware of the changes in the law, that they understand as best they can in simple language what those changes are, and that our office is here to help. We have built out partnerships with several organizations in the community so that because we're the prosecutor's office, we can't represent people in getting their records expunged, but we can certainly get the process started for them, turn them over to a volunteer attorney who can help assist with, finishing out the process. And we are in the community passing out that information. Just this week, our interns went down Main Street, passing out information to businesses for folks to receive when they go in. A couple of weeks ago, our office was at the bus terminal in Ypsilanti, passing out information and goodie bags, being available to, let the community know that we are here to help. We certainly believe that people who have been charged, convicted, who've served their time, and they have stayed on the right side of the law for a number of years, we don't believe that they should be forever punished because we all suffer from that. If someone is in the community and they are struggling, they're not able to survive because they have an age-old criminal record, from a decade ago. They've done nothing wrong since then. But because of that record, they're unable to get a better job. They're unable to get public dollars for school. They're unable to live in, particular housing units because of that record. That's holding them back. That certainly is not giving them an opportunity to thrive. That is not giving them an opportunity to contribute in a meaningful way to society. And we know that oftentimes people who are very limited in their opportunities, those are the very people who end up committing harm, right? So this again is an effort to promote public safety. And that is something that you all can help us with, spreading the word, sending people to our website, or our office. They can call, they can email. We are available to help people and walk them through this process. In fact, because of some of our initial outreach efforts in the community, we've already gotten an email from someone who said, "Hey, I saw a flyer in the community and I would like some help expunging a criminal record." And when we get those reports, we're like, yes, this is working. So if you all can, expand that and get the word out in your various circles, that's something that we are doing and trying to help people with, that would be amazing.
Great, thank you. That's a great action item for us. Thank you.
And importantly, it is free of charge. Sometimes people are just like, well, how much are you going to charge me lawyers for this? Like, no, we're doing this, and you don't have to pay anything, because sometimes, the truth of the matter is, private lawyers will charge $2,000 sometimes for an expungement representation. The whole reason people are usually trying to get their records expunged is because they want to get a job.
Right.
So you're going to catch 22. Where are you going to get the $2,000 if you can't get a job?
Well, thank you. So it is the top of the hour for us, and we try to end pretty close to 12 here. So thank you both. This was very informational for us. It's great to hear all the progress that's happening in our community, and to get to know you a little bit better, and also hear a little bit about what actions we can take. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I'll hand it back over to you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, of course, to our guests. Everybody from the prosecutor's office who brought these updates today. We are, of course, always grateful that people take the time to come and present to our group, help us inform voters in the area, because we know that these are important issues in and out of election years, and we want to make sure folks are up to date on them. So thank you for that. As promised, I'm going to give everybody a